Thank you. So I'm Sara Froelich. I work for AAKP, which is a Boston-based biotech company that's focused exclusively on developing new therapies to treat kidney disease. And I want to thank Paul and Diana and Richard for convening this forum today to talk about these important issues. What I want to spend a few minutes talking about is just the perspective of an innovator in this space and what are some of the barriers that make this really difficult. And it matters in terms of federal policies, both from a coverage and reimbursement perspective as well as other research-oriented federal policies. But we are so encouraged and so highly supportive of the Secretary's Kidney Health Initiative. I've been in the renal space now for over 15 years, and I never remember an HHS secretary ever talking about kidney disease, recognizing the importance of this from a public health crisis standpoint and from really being dedicated to try to improve care in this area. So we are very excited about where the Secretary wants to go with this, and particularly the depth of understanding that it's not just about dialysis, that it's important to address the high rate of the lack of diagnosis, and really focusing on trying to slow progression of the disease and investing in earlier treatments. And we're very excited about KidneyX, and Deep's done a fantastic job in terms of this initial prize grant awards that have been done in the last few months. And that holds a lot of promise, we think, to really accelerate the development of new drugs, devices, and digital health tools. But what we are concerned about is, despite all this effort, we get the message, we get the mission, we are 100% behind that. But if these inventions don't reach patients, then we won't have accomplished what we intend to do. And from the perspective of a pharmaceutical company involved in this, we are very concerned about some of the coverage and reimbursement issues that we're facing. And we sort of see this in two ways. One is the Medicare Part D program, where we think it's really important that CMS, meet the needs of kidney patients by ensuring coverage for drugs that are developed for this population. And then in the dialysis space, that's Medicare Part D. Part B covers the dialysis payment. And, we've had a prospective payment system now, a bundle payment, since 2011. And there are problems with that, and it needs to be modified now and modernized so that it can support the incorporation of new technologies and improve patient care. Sandeep mentioned Kidney Health Initiative. Paul's been very involved in this. I think you were just the co-chair of the last meeting. I think this goes back to 2012. AAKP is involved in this. We have a board member on KHI, but it's a very important ASN FDA public-private partnership because it's really focusing on what needs to be done here. We've acknowledged that there needs to be a more understanding of pathophysiology of the disease. What can we do to enhance the clinical trial infrastructure to get more surrogate biomarkers validated? What can we do to have more unique clinical trial designs and bring the patient perspective into all this? But the fact that we have KidneyX now and KHI for a longer period of time just reflects the lack of innovation that historically we've found in this space. I think everyone's aware of the tremendous innovation that's occurred in oncology and cardiovascular disease. I think a great statistic here is between 2015 and 17, FDA approved 29 new drugs for cancer, 2 in chronic kidney disease. So I think it's clear that the investment into treatments in kidney disease is not commensurate with the huge toll that it takes on public health and the current mortality rates. But for those of us in this space, these early stage startups, it's really hard, as Sandeep said, to attract venture capital. And I think in large part, Wall Street understands what's involved in the ESRD payment system. They see this capitated payment system that's been very flat over the years, and they view this as a zero-sum game, that there's no room, if you will, for new innovation. And there also have been some negative cover decisions which really undermine confidence in this space, and I'm going to use one of these as a case example this afternoon. So we've got a drug, an innovative drug developed for kidney patients. It was developed and it got FDA approval in 2014 as a phosphate binder to control serum phosphorus for dialysis patients. And we did additional clinical trials and got a second indication in 2017 to treat iron deficiency anemia in the non-dialysis population. It was great. All the Part D plans covered the product with no restrictions until recently when CMS withdrew coverage for the renal anemia indication without a lot of rationale as to why it did that. And Medicare really stands alone in that the overwhelming majority of payers, whether they're government or commercial payers, including state Medicaid programs, even managed Medicaid programs, TRICARE, the VA health program, et cetera, covers all the rest cover both indications. And I think it's important to note, too, that there aren't a lot of alternative therapies for CKD patients with anemia. OTC iron products don't work. Eventually, patients end up on IV iron, which may not be a big deal if you're a dialysis patient and you're in a dialysis facility 3 times a week. But if you don't have a port or any access system, then you have to figure out a way to get transportation's an issue. You have to figure out a way to get to a hospital or an infusion center, and there are risks associated with IV iron, primarily anaphylaxis and hypersensitivity. And the nephrologist that we have will also tell you that there's a lot of concern just because of the toxic nature of IV iron about potential damage and scarring to the patient vein system that's needed for hemodialysis if patients progress. Often patients don't get treated, and then if left untreated, they end up in the hospital. A hospitalist or an emergency room physician will see a very low hemoglobin. They end up with blood transfusions, and that reduces their ability to be matched for a transplant. So the consequences of these alternative treatments are significant. So we have been in conversation with CMS, and I know the nephrology community's weighed in, and certainly a lot of the patient organizations have as well. But we think it's really important to recognize that we believe this drug, for instance, is a new innovative product, does meet the definition of a Part D drug. There's no exclusion for anemia and chronic kidney disease. It is a unique chemically synthesized coordination complex that is remarkable, and that it has both a systemic and a local benefit. The local effect of this is to bind phosphorus, and the systemic effect is to raise hemoglobin. But we've gotten comments from some of the folks at CMS that it's a supplement, which we don't understand. Obviously, it's not a dietary supplement because dietary supplements can't make disease claims. And it's certainly not used for supplementation. I mean, it's been tested and has been FDA approved to treat the disease of anemia and chronic kidney disease. But we think this is a good example because it's really important for the folks that are making decisions about whether to cut products or not in this area to really understand kidney disease. As you all probably know, there are many reasons for anemia. There are many causes. In chronic kidney disease patients, it's not caused from a dietary or nutritional deficiency. It's caused from the inflammatory state that causes chronic kidney disease, where you've got hepcidin levels, this inflammatory marker protein, which rises, and that tells the body to shut down iron absorption and to stop the release of cellular stores. And so I think it's important for CMS officials to understand the cause of this comorbidity in this population, and the fact that it's really quite a serious complication, because not only do patients feel terrible from profound fatigue, but it's also associated with higher mortality, higher morbidity, and progression of disease. So I think this is a really good visual of sort of where this product fits into the space. I mean, we talked earlier about the $35 billion here that's spent on stage 5. That's for folks that have have already progressed to dialysis, but you've got $79 billion in Medicare spending for stages 1 through 4, and that's really the population there where this product has benefit for use in treating anemia, because the whole idea here is we want to provide better management of patients before they progress to dialysis, and maybe we can prevent them from progressing at all. But as you go along the continuum of kidney care, or kidney disease, you see that there is, dysfunction of iron metabolism. Patients develop anemia. They get high serum phosphorus, and this product, with its dual mechanism, fits both of those conditions. So we have asked CMS to reconsider, again, with input from the renal community, and we think it's just a win-win in every respect. We think it's the right policy decision, that Part D doesn't exclude this, but it's about interpretation of what this product is. We think it's completely consistent with the Secretary's goal of incentivizing innovation and, more importantly, developing new therapies for earlier stage treatment. And we think it's very similar to vitamin D analogs. If you all remember the coverage problems that when the Part D program was put into effect, CMS initially said vitamin D analogs wouldn't be covered, and then CMS switched. It's very similar in that vitamin D that you get from sunlight exposure or even from diet can't be converted in a patient with chronic kidney disease, because that has to be done in the kidney. So I think it's very comparable to anemia, where elemental iron can't be absorbed by these patients because of the inflammatory response. So some product then has to be redesigned as a workaround for that problem. We also think it's the right clinical decision. Certainly the nephrology and kidney patient organizations have been aligned on sort of what this product is and what it's not, and the value and the continuum of care for these patients. And clearly, most patients would prefer an oral drug than having to get infusions in hospitals or infusion centers. And we also think it makes complete sense for the Medicare program, and it's actually cheaper than IV iron. And there needs to be a recognition that CKD patients with anemia cost the system a lot more money than those without, and there's a delta there of about $30,000. So I'll stop here on this particular drug, but I think it's a great example where we are in this innovative space and have come up with an innovative product, and we think a coverage decision like this doesn't make sense and is sending the wrong message, certainly, to industry. Another area I just wanted to focus on for a few minutes is sort of moving to the Part B ESRD bundle payment. And as I mentioned, this has been in existence since 2011. It was put into place to try to force efficiencies in the provision of dialysis, as well as to create the incentives that existed for overutilization of ESAs. And certainly this program has accomplished all that. But I think at this point in time, now almost 10 years later, the methodology and the system is pretty fragile. And even MedPAC, which has access to 100% of Medicare claims, even came out in its March report of this year that the margin for dialysis providers is now negative. And of course, they're looking at 2017 data. But and I don't know if you all can read this, but the margin now for dialysis providers is negative 1.1, and there's a huge lack of adequate payment in facilities with the lowest volume. So those margins are now at a negative 21.3%, even though urban facilities may have a positive margin. There is a 5.4% negative margin for rural facilities. This, to us, shows that payment is not adequate at this point. And we believe that the problem is going to continue, and that the 2019 margin is going to be negative as well. And so I think this really requires another look at the methodology that was put in place to do updates on dialysis payment. And if you sort of go back to the sordid history of when this program was put into place, they sort of took the existing inputs, costs, labor, drugs, equipment, et cetera, from 2007, trended those forward. There's a productivity adjustment that's taken off the top, and what you end up then with is a completely stagnant system that has resulted in a very flat base rate in terms of payment for dialysis facilities. And again, these payments are supposed to cover all costs associated with dialysis treatment. So I think it's important to recognize that the system's really constrained, and for those of us that are involved in trying to develop new therapies, we don't see any room in the current system for drugs, devices, or even changes in medical practice to be reflected in payment. And I think this is a good visual. This is, if you look at the blue bar, that is the base rate. I think it's important to recognize that there are facility level adjustments and patient-specific adjustments, but the base rate has been essentially flat. It's even gone down. And not to be too simplistic here, but because there was a rebasing that captured some of the savings from the lower rate of ESA utilization. But the darker bar there is taking the original base rate set in 2011, and if it just was modified and adjusted for average medical inflation, that's where we would be today. So you look at this, again, in terms of innovation and wonder where the space is for innovation. So we've got a few ideas about what's important, and I really have to give credit to CMS and the last reg that it came out, the last rule that came out for calendar year 2019, in which CMS indicated that it's going to provide now a 2-year transitional payment for new drugs that are approved after January 1 of 2020. And this is really important because you see in the standard base rate payment, there's no room for anything new. This will allow dialysis providers to gain experience with new drugs. But CMS, unfortunately, is applying this TDAPA, what we call the TDAPA payment, to generics and biosimilars. I think it's safe to say that all of us in industry and the kidney community oppose this. We do not view generic drugs or biosimilars as innovation. We're also concerned about the payment rate. And every other aspect of Medicare, whether it's hospital, outpatient, or inpatient, the payment rate for new drugs is at the average selling price plus 6%, and CMS has set the payment rate at ASP plus 0, which is concerning because averages by definition infers that half the facilities will have acquisition costs that are higher than the payment rate. And we also have to factor in the fact that there is a federal sequestration which takes 2% off the top. So at the end of the day, this is not really covering the cost of new drugs. Another source of problem here is that it's contemplated that the separate payment would only last for 2 years. And because of the data lag, if CMS made a decision about how to make an adjustment for the base rate, they would only have like 6 to 9 months of claims data. And so we think it's really important because of the time that it takes for dialysis facilities to change the way they treat patients. They do pilots in certain clinics. Then it's very treatment protocol driven care. And in order for them to really assess the value of a new product and how it could be used to benefit their patients, this will take time and resources. And then last, we think the other deficiency in the proposed TDAPA is that they would make base rate adjustments only for drugs that fall outside the functional categories. And I don't know how familiar you are with this, but there are 11 functional categories that CMS has defined. One, for instance, is anemia management drugs. There's one for bone and mineral metabolism. But if you look at the functional categories, they're so broadly drawn that we view that they cover everything that could possibly be developed and that we know is being developed in terms of dialysis care. So I will stop here. And in conclusion, again, we are so excited about the direction of this administration, but we just really want to make sure that coverage and payment decisions, support the rhetoric for innovation and improving care. We think that, kidney patients are already in a situation where in their bundle payment system where they don't have equal access to innovation now, and that needs to be rectified by sort of modernizing the payment system. CMS needs to understand what diseases and comorbidities that kidney patients have, and the need really to ensure that drugs, particularly for upstream treatment, are paid for, and that they seek some kind of balance for cost containment, which is what they did in 2011, and an ability to innovate, which is what the focus is now of this administration. So I think there is a lot of alignment in the renal community. I know innovation's been a big focus of most of the organizations in this space, and we look forward to working with all of you on these issues.